A senior advisor to Secretary of Defense under President Trump, joins me. Appreciate your joining us, Colonel MacGregor. How do you see what's happened in the last 72 hours? It appeared that, unlike in June, where Israel and the US virtually had a free run of the skies of Tehran, heading across the region, Iran is striking back at UAE, at Bahrain, at Kuwait, and making it, as Yusuf just described, a regional war. Do you believe America is prepared for this, for a long war now?
No, and I hope that your audience understands that this war is now an Indian emergency as well. If India's $500 million investment in Chabahar is on fire and its oil routes are blocked, then Indian interests are at severe risk. You depend upon 2.6 million barrels of oil to flow through to your ports from the Strait of Hormuz every day. If that closes, then every Indian family ends up paying a war tax they didn't vote for. So I think I hope that India understands this, because India has a role to play in this crisis.
Saying seems to say the arena of conflict this time is spreading far and wide with serious economic consequences. Am I correct?
Well, of course, every American base in the region has been hit. Even the American air base at Incirlik in Turkey has been struck. All of these bases have been rendered unusable by us. What fields, it doesn't make any difference. So Iran has done really a spectacular job of simultaneously attacking all of these critical bases very early on. And finally, remember, this is probably going to go on for weeks or months unless someone sobers up in Washington. But the thing that will decide this outcome is logistics. We simply don't have enough missiles on hand, and we have a very long line of communications that takes us most of the ports, virtually all of them in the region, that we would normally use to reload ships, reload missiles, reprovision our forces. So our elements at sea as well as on land right now are limited in how long they can maintain this war, contrary to what is being said in Washington right now.
So are we to understand that Washington was not prepared for this kind of Iranian retaliation? Is that what you're suggesting, that in any war game planning in Washington at the Pentagon, there was no idea that Iran would immediately escalate this or try to escalate it into a regional conflict, which could then get far more prolonged?
Well, whether or not someone in the Pentagon knew anything or thought it all through is a question I can't answer. But one thing is very clear. We don't have an end state in mind. There is no off-ramp. The conditions that we demanded, which were really Israel's conditions from Iran, could not be met. They never could. So it's very obvious that what we need today is a way to stability. Right at the moment, we can't get there. You know, by the way, I think it's very important for people to understand that this war began with the Israeli strike. And frankly, at the time, we were not yet ready to fight. But we decided that we would go in support of Israel anyway. So I don't think any of this is going to any sort of agreed strategic program or schedule.
You made a very interesting point. You seem to suggest that this war, in a way, is being driven by the Israelis. They did the first strike, and the Americans are simply following on that, which is very strange. That normally doesn't happen. Normally, it's the other way around, that the U.S. takes the lead. Are you saying it's been very different in that sense? Netanyahu is the one who has virtually pushed Donald Trump into this war.
Netanyahu has more influence in Washington, where essentially the Israel lobby has purchased the Congress and the White House. President Trump owes his position in the White House to Zionist billionaires that funded him. So Israel is very much in control. The United States is not. And this is a serious problem. You'll note that the Secretary of Defense talked about Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism. Well, that's a lot of nonsense. He's referring to things that happened 40 years ago. Iran has changed profoundly, and Iran is not a state sponsor of terrorism. If we were really concerned about radical Islam and terrorism, we'd be focused on Pakistan. Pakistan is the wellspring of radical Islam, financed in large part by Saudi Arabia. And now we have a government in Syria, which is a product of ISIS and al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. So why are we attacking Iran? We are attacking Iran because it's the last state in the region, at least at this point, that is presenting resistance to Israel. Israeli or Jewish supremacy in the region cannot be established until Iran is eliminated as a major player. So this is no longer about regime change. We're trying to destroy the Iranian state.
But so when Donald Trump today turns and says that, look, we're going to escalate this war, you've not seen it in an unprecedented manner. It may take weeks. He's also warned of casualties. We've already got confirmed reports of 4 American soldiers. Are you saying it could get worse? Because one red line we are told is that there will be no use of U.S. ground troops come what may.
Well, there can't be any use of ground troops simply because we don't have the ground troops to send. Our army is a fraction of what it was in the past. We simply can't project power into the region. If we try to project power into the region, ballistic missiles will destroy us. Cruise missiles will destroy us. This is a new world we're in. We're seeing the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one. You know, if you just look at the UAE, for instance, it is being effectively taken out of the world economy by a few cheap drones. And our missile defenses have turned out to be completely inadequate to the task of protecting the Gulf states, where we've invested time and money to effectively protect them. Well, we can't do it, and that's being demonstrated. I think the world is changing dramatically right now.
So, Colonel MacGregor, do you believe, therefore, regime change is possible, or will that be off the table? Will this now be the U.S. and Israel claiming, look, we got Ali Khamenei out. Now we'll press the pause button, perhaps, and go back to the negotiating table? Does the U.S. have the appetite, I come back to it, for a prolonged confrontation, as you're saying, is more likely?
No, there's no appetite in the United States for any sort of major war, let alone a long war. That's something that most Americans are unalterably opposed to. The Israelis have purchased the Congress and the White House. That's why we're doing what we are doing. There is no pressure or interest in the United States in any of this. You know, what we want in the United States has nothing to do with what President Trump and Congress are doing right now. This really needs to be understood. In the meantime, supply chains, you know, the global hub in the UAE with aviation, these things are being destroyed. You know, you've got 4.6 million of your citizens stranded in the Gulf. India faces a domestic humanitarian crisis that no evacuation can easily handle. This is a disaster. That's why I said I hope that the Indian government, which is probably the only adult in the room left right now, can bridge this gap. We're entering a sovereign shift. The future of the world is not being written in Washington anymore. By the time this is over, the Sykes-Picot Treaty, which created all of these tiny Arab states after the First World War, will be irrelevant. You know, the future is being written now in the Persian Gulf and in Asia. It's time really for everybody to understand the world has changed. America doesn't want it to change. That is the American government. We're really fighting against the future right now, not just Iran, because Iran is not our enemy. It's Israel's enemy.
But in conclusion, you've got the might of the American forces, you've got and technology, you've got Israel with perhaps the sharpest intelligence that you can get, and also a very strong force with technology. And you've got other nations slowly grouping, rallying around the US and Israel. Are you telling me that Iran can resist this, you believe, for an extended period?
Yes, I think Iran is resisting. And that's really all Iran has to do. Iran is the one that has to endure, it has to survive, and I think that it will. The United States is in a very difficult position now because of all the bombastic rhetoric from President Trump. We keep advertising ourselves as the most powerful nation in the world. That means that Iran has to submit unconditionally to whatever we demand based on what the Israelis demand. That's not going to happen. In the meantime, I think we figured out that a few $1,000s worth of drones can take down a $500 billion economy in the Gulf, the UAE, a great example. This thing is going to drag on for months. The Chinese and the Russians are watching. Iranian air defenses are beginning to be effective. The missiles that Iran has are almost inexhaustible, whereas the missiles on our side are very limited, and we can't produce them quickly. We can't surge power.
Right.
We can't surge missiles.
He's been saying different things, many of them contradictory as well, Colonel MacGregor. What do you think an end game looks like for Donald Trump at this time?
Well, I don't think Donald Trump can end anything. He's promised to destroy Iran. He makes outrageous statements like unconditional surrender. He said terrible things about Iran, 90% of which are completely untrue. He needs help. He can't do this on his own. I think that's why he called President Putin, and President Putin declined to intervene and help him in any real meaningful way. And why should he? We have lied to the Russians. We've lied to the Iranians. Twice the Iranians have been attacked by us while we were negotiating. So I think at this point, he really needs help. And this is one of the reasons that I've been telling people the only man and state in the world that I think could really help is Prime Minister Modi. India is now a great power. It has the ability to weigh into this. And I think India has good relations with everybody in the region. The Israelis certainly trust India. I think that Prime Minister Modi has good relations with the Iranians. Russians. This is enormously important because we don't. So I've urged repeatedly President Trump to call Prime Minister Modi and ask him for his assistance and perhaps negotiate something. But right now he continues sort of spinning this story that we are going to destroy Iran. What interest does the United States have in destroying Iran? None. And then look at yourselves. You have billions invested in the Gulf region. You have 9.5 million Indian citizens working in the Gulf. That's more people than Israel has in its population. So this is absurd. It makes no sense at all. You have investments up on the Mediterranean and Haifa and other places. This war needs to end, not just because it's bad for the United States and Israel and Iran. It needs to end for the world. The global economy is being sent into a tailspin, and nobody in Washington seems to grasp that yet.
Colonel MacGregor, my third question to you is, in 2 weeks of this campaign on Iran, the country has demonstrated, the ability to continue to be able to strike targets, at range. As late as last night, they were, sending drones at targets in different parts of the Gulf. What kind of leverage do you think Iran still has 2 weeks into this war?
I think Iran now has the initiative. It's shifted away from us. We've demonstrated that, yes, we can bomb lots of targets. We've done that before. We did that in Vietnam. But there is no ground force on the land to exploit it. And in the absence of any ground force, it's not terribly meaningful. The Iranians have demonstrated, much as others have in wars, the Chinese against Japan, the Germans against us, that they're willing to absorb the punishment and they can still strike back effectively. We have no means of defending ourselves. Our anti-missile technology is not as good as Iran's missile technology and its drones. So at this point, we really need a strategy to rescue us from this dead end. That's what Trump needs. But no one seems to understand it completely. I think it's beginning to sink in with some. But clearly, President Trump doesn't want to admit that.
What kind of conversation do you think would be happening between, Trump and Netanyahu, or the two administrations in the U.S. and Israel at this point of time, Colonel MacGregor? Because through the 2 weeks that we've seen of this conflict, there have been occasions where, divergences have been, out in public. The manner in which certain operations have been conducted showed that there may have been a difference of opinion. What do you think that conversation would look like right now?
Well, you're absolutely right. Remember, the cooperation between ourselves and Israel is artificially constructed. We don't share very many interests. We have no interest in going to war with the Islamic world over Israel. We have no interest in destroying Iran. Ultimately, we want to do business. We're a commercial state. And I think that's something that has been discussed. The problem is that, let's be frank, Zionist billionaires in the United States working for Israel were instrumental in putting Mr. Trump into office, and they continue to control much of Congress. As a result, not much is going to change in the near term, but inevitably, you're right. Our interests diverge sharply, and at some point, somebody in Washington is going to say, look, this is enough. We're not going to do this anymore. And by the way, while we're talking, Israel is being leveled. It's being destroyed. It's being pulverized. Israel is in a very dangerous position right now.
I want to explore what you said earlier with a little bit more depth, Colonel MacGregor, where you said that, an intermediary is perhaps the urgent need of the day 2 weeks into this war, and that the Indian Prime Minister strikes you as perhaps the only person right now who can actually get in there, leverage his good relations with all the combatants and forge some kind of an off-ramp or a ceasefire. Can you explain how that would happen? Would Trump need to reach out to Prime Minister Modi? Is that even realistic?
Yes, I think he does. I think that's what he should do. He should essentially call a prime minister and said, we would like to broker a ceasefire, because the first step in ending this travesty is to essentially say, we need a ceasefire. We need to disengage from combat. We Americans are willing to disengage. We will prevail upon the Israelis to disengage. But we need cooperation from Iran. Once this disengagement has happened and there is a pause, then there are all sorts of issues that have to be ironed out. And remember that at the top of everybody's list is to open the Straits of Hormuz. That's vital and essential for everybody, for you, for Japan, for South Korea, everyone who is dependent upon the oil from there. The prices of everything, whether it's electricity or fuel, are all going up all over the world, specifically, devastatingly rising in Europe, rising in Japan and South Korea. And after all, we have friendly, good relations with those people. It's not just a question of Israel. It's a question of all these other states with whom we have good ties and good commercial relations. But we've made so many mistakes in diplomacy that we need someone like Prime Minister Modi who can bridge that gap. So we're talking about the first step is to get the two sides to disengage. Then it's going to take a long time for us to discuss the resolution of this. And remember, that's tough for Americans. Americans think everything happens overnight. That's what got President Trump into trouble. Oh, in a few days, this war will be over. Absolutely not.
When Colonel MacGregor, when Trump says that things are about to get much, much worse, he sometimes contradicts himself, of course, and says the war is about to end, and then he says something like, "You have no idea what the scumbags are going to receive today." My question to you is, how far do you think Trump can realistically sustain this combat operation?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult, not only to sustain the tempo, the intensity, because we've already used up a lot of our more costly, precise weapons. It's also an economic question and a financial one. Our economy is fragile. Our financial system is fragile. I don't know how much news reaches you, but the situation on Wall Street is very bad.
Yeah.
Because they too bought into the assumption that this would be a short, decisive war. It's now dawned on everyone that's not going to happen. And our system of borrowing heavily to sustain our economy is not working. People are not buying our debt. The opposite is occurring. So I think that is a limitation. Now, is that a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I don't know, but it is looming on the horizon. So you put that together with the problem of keeping these forces fighting indefinitely when you can't produce enough missiles over time to sustain it. When President Trump says, oh, we have enough of everything, he's talking about not the exotic, precise missiles that we need. He's talking about everything else. Well, we've got lots of artillery ammunition, but it's not going to do us a lot of good in this fight. And the idea of sending ground troops there is absurd. There is no support in the United States for that. And we've made our ground forces so small, it'll be very difficult for them to make much of an impact.
Final question, Colonel MacGregor, is do you think that there is any outcome possible in front of America at this point of time that doesn't involve retreating to some measure from the stated objectives when this war actually began? Is that a possibility at all?
Yes, I think it's all, you pointed out at the beginning that the initial assumptions about regime change had to be abandoned pretty quickly. Unfortunately, at that point began this war of destruction. Certainly we can destroy a lot of Iran. What purpose does that have? What good is that? Especially when you're trying to tell everyone that you wanted to, quote unquote, help the Iranian people. Well, when you bomb a country, people may not all love the government, but they usually join together to fight the person bombing them. So the notion that you're going to bomb a country into reform and change that's positive for them or us is absurd. I just don't know what is next for Mr. Trump. At some point, I would think his advisors are going to have to tell him the truth. If you continue down this road, you risk the whole presidency. You risk being removed. I don't know if anybody's telling him that, but that's the truth. Because again, remember, this is not a war that Americans went into the streets and demanded. Quite the contrary. The polls from the very beginning have all been very anti-war. This is not something Americans want.
Colonel Douglas MacGregor, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time and giving us your thoughts on this 2-week mark into this conflict. Thanks very much.
Thank you.